In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the bearing cup on a DeWalt grinder. The bearing cup goes over the rear armature bearing. Its purpose is to center the bearing, as well as to allow the armature a little bit of back and forth play. Typically, the only time the bearing cup will need to be replaced is if the bearing itself fails, in which case the cup can be torn or melted. Replacing the cup is easy to do, and we're going to show you how. Bearing cups, as well as many other parts, can be found on our website. Let's get started. We'll begin by removing the side handle and the guard. This will just make disassembly easier when we go to separate the gear case from the housing. Next, I'll separate the two halves of the rear housing. Next, I need to pull the brushes away from the armature. To do that, I'll pull the brush wires away from the holders, pull this tension spring out of the way, and then pull the brush arm back. And I'll repeat this on the other side. Now I need to remove the separator fan from the rear of the armature. It just simply screws on, but it is a reverse thread. And to remove it, I'll need to lock the motor from spinning. To do that, I'll just use the spindle lock up on the gear assembly. And now I can remove the fan. Next, I'll separate the gear case assembly from the motor housing. It's secured with 4 screws. With the armature removed, now we can see the rear bearing cup. It's a rubber piece and it just pulls away from the bearing. And now I'll just install our new bearing cup. And now I'll just slide the armature and gear case assembly back into the motor housing. And I'll secure the gear case housing to the motor housing with the screws. Now I can reinstall the separator fan. Remember, it's a reverse thread, and again I'll lock the motor from spinning using the spindle lock. Now I'll reposition the brushes back onto the armature, reattach the brush wire, and repeat this on the other side. Now we'll replace our rear housings to the motor housing. And then I'll take a moment and make sure all the wires are tucked out of the way so nothing gets pinched when we put the other half on. Now we'll replace the lock button. This tab on the button needs to face towards the armature, followed by the paddle switch, and then the other half of the housing. As I do this, I want to make sure that the posts on the switch and on the lock button all line up properly with the housing. Once I get it in place, I'll just test everything real quick to make sure it's right. That looks good. So now I can re-secure the screws. And now I'll reinstall the guard and the side handle.